Hello, welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining. We're about to get started. Okay, I think we can get started. So, hi everyone. My name is Robert Bell. I'm a product specialist in NetApp, and you've just joined a session which is about turning storage efficiency into cost savings with Amazon FSx for NetApp ONTAP. So this is going to be a webinar where we will focus on a specific problem that I think a lot of you are facing, and we will also show you how these issues can be solved with a specific product or service in AWS. I will be showing a little bit of the, I would say, the situation that we're seeing today, and then my colleague Luba will show a demonstration. So Luba is actually an expert on this product. Luba, you want to say hi to everyone?
Of course. Hello, everybody, and hello, Robert. I'm very happy to see all of you here, and I hope you'll enjoy the session. And just so you'll know, don't think about the session as the end of the whole thing. We're going to share with you some links that you'll be able to book up meetings with us after this if there's something or few things that we're talking about that is or are relevant for you.
Absolutely. So really, I think what we want to do is to give maybe a little bit of a new perspective to things that might be happening in your environment, show you how a lot of companies are addressing this with Amazon FSx for ONTAP, and show a demonstration with a tool that you can really use to see how you can do this yourself. So it's really, I think the important part is really the demonstration that we'll be showing. So I do encourage you to stay till the end. We will try to make it as short as possible so we don't take too much of your time. But as for what we would like to do, we want to make this more interactive. So first of all, we will be asking you some questions just to get an idea about where you are. So there will be polls that will pop up, and we would like it if you could answer so that we can address that. But also, we would like to really answer specific questions. So there's a lot of material here which I won't go into in detail, but it is important for me if there are specific things that you want to know, then there is a Q&A button in this interface, and you can just write your questions in the Q&A. We will do our best to answer all the questions during the session. There will be some time at the end. But really, I think what's important is really to anything that comes up, just answer. If we don't have time to answer it in detail during the session, we will reach out to you and send it to you. So please, as I said, write your questions in the Q&A. I'll be showing a little bit of theory, and then we will dive pretty soon into the actual practice to see it, a live demonstration of how this works. So I think we can get started now. I will just show a quick agenda. So it's really basically about the issue of inefficiencies that exist in every cloud environment, which are often hidden because it's something that's kind of like you see the costs, and the costs are not necessarily broken down into the different components. So what we want to do is really explore where these inefficiencies come from, where the hidden costs are, and then move on to showing how Amazon FSx for NetApp ONTAP, which is a service that's available for everyone in AWS, how that has built-in features and mechanisms that can help you reverse these issues and really have a long-term scalable strategy for keeping costs efficient. Then we'll show a demonstration, which is with a tool called Workload Factory, NetApp Workload Factory, which is an orchestration tool that you can use to not only to see how you can save costs, but also implement these features that we're going to be talking about. And there will be time at the end for Q&A. But as I said, ask your questions throughout the sessions if we can. We will answer them directly as they appear. So like I promised, we're going to be asking you poll questions. So right now you will see something pop up, which is a question. And the question is, what is your current status related to the AWS cloud? So we would kind of like want to know, first of all, which stage are you in your cloud journey, whether you've migrated or evaluating or just exploring? And also, what concerns you have about storage costs, which are currently on your mind. I assume that there are certain concerns, otherwise you wouldn't have joined this session. So we kind of like want to get an idea of what this is so that we can fine tune our the information that we give you to the status that you're in now.
Really looking forward to see the result of this poll, Robert. Especially, I would say to the second questions about the concerns regarding cost. I have yet to meet a customer who's not concerned about it. It's always a question of what, and honestly, I would probably choose all three of them, but
Yeah,
really want to know what is the main thing
yeah.
that is interesting to the people that we have in the session here today.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think all three of them are pretty much common amongst anyone who consumes a service. You want predictability. You want to know what you're paying for.
Mhm.
But you also want to know if there's any trade-off. So, oh, wow, okay. So, interestingly enough, what we can see is that the majority of the people here are not actually fully in the cloud, that they're exploring, which is great because this is really, I think, the best time to hear this information is really before you've started having things in a large scale. The problem is often that when you scale, fixing these problems, if you hadn't done it right from the start, is often more painful than if you have the information in advance and you know really how to build it in a way that works. Um, Now, as for I would say the second question, what we can see, it's pretty much balanced, although
Yeah.
I think that the unpredictable bills is really a big issue, a slightly bigger issue than the others. Unpredictable bills, I think that kind of like I would understand that as saying, okay, it's costing money, but we don't know exactly how this money is distributed, and that's kind of like where we want to focus because we do want to see how if you look at what's going on under the hood, or if you have the tools that can actually tweak these things, then it really gives you much better visibility into how you're using the resources, especially when it comes to storage costs.
Mhm. Absolutely. And Robert, something else I want to mention regarding the cost and concern about unpredictable cost is I know that when moving to the cloud, it's one of the biggest worries, right? Because on-prem, you usually know what you're paying for, right? You know that you have chosen a specific machine or environment, and you know this is what you're going to pay for. In the cloud, with the flexibility that it offers, this is incredible and amazing feature. I think the fact that you don't have to be relying on hardware that you need to requisite in advance. In the cloud, it's much easier to expand as needed, but of course, with that comes the concern about cost. And I think that one of the things we'll cover in this session and also the aspects of how to control that and make sure that you're not going to be overwhelmed with the bill in the end of the month.
Exactly. And I think that really what we're talking about here is not just archive data where you're just putting it and you're just storing it and leaving it and sort of put it there, forget it. We're
Mhm.
talking about active data, data that is sort of like what the organization relies on in order to do its business, the access, the data that you have to access that you have to actually use in efficient ways. So I think this is where these challenges come in, and I want to go over I would say the main things that are really everywhere in every company that do impact this situation where you end up with these, I would say, excessive costs that can be avoided or costs that you're not entirely aware of. So I would say the first thing I want to talk about is over provisioning. Now, over provisioning is not a technology problem, it's more a psychological problem. If I need storage and I'm the team leader in R&D in R&D and I want my environment to have sufficient storage, I would go to the IT people or the storage people. I'd say, give me this much. They'd say, how much do you need? And I would obviously ask for more than I really think I will be using. And that makes sense because I don't want to reach a situation where my project is stuck because there's no room in capacity. So I would first of all, I would ask for more. And I think there's a tendency to really over provision when it comes to storage, which makes sense because you don't want to be in the situation where you didn't provide enough. So I think that's a psychological thing that just happens and you can't really avoid it. It's just something to be aware of. Another thing is also that not all data is equal. If you look at data, which is even data that you use on a daily basis, if I go into my hard disk right now on my hard disk on my SSD on my laptop, and I just look at what information is really being accessed, it will be a very small part of the information. It could be up, 20% or less of the data that's actually being used on a day-to-day basis. There's a lot of data it's part of the system, but no one's touching that data and it could be just lying there for a long time. So understanding like what the difference between hot data and cold data is. Hot data needs high performance, cold data needs low costs. But that's something that is not automatically available in every storage system. The other thing is the snapshots and backups. So snapshots are very important because I think in every environment where you're working with whether it's development, or you're developing your own software, SaaS, or whatever it is, it's often necessary to fall back to a previous point in time. So having snapshots, just being able to snapshot the current data, and then if there's a problem, if there's some sort of corruption or some sort of issue, I want to snap back to how it was before. That's, I think, an essential tool for every organization. But if by doing these snapshots, I'm duplicating the amount of data that I need to store, that can be a real issue. And that also is true for developed dev test environments where I want to replicate a certain environment. So I'm creating an environment for the development team where they would have access to the data. And this is sort of an independent, I would say it could be a clone of the data. That as well, when it comes to large scale, that can be very, very expensive. And
Absolutely.
then,
And Robert, just before we go for the next one, I want to say, and I'm sure everybody here already feeling that, I think with the introduction of AI into development cycles, the development cycles become way shorter. And what used to be, a new version every few months could be reduced to once every few weeks and even shorter. And as you mentioned, if you need an environment for dev, for testing, prod, it could
yeah,
become very quickly very expensive. And we'll show you soon how FSx for ONTAP definitely can help you handle with that with ease and with very little cost.
exactly. And I think that the final thing is sort of like it's written as lack of best practice. It's not that there's no best practices, but best practices tend to get old because things are changing. When you talk about the cloud itself is constantly changing. The infrastructure is changing, the instances, the type of storage you have, and the ways, the services that you use, all of this is changing. So the best practices are kind of evolving. And it is important to have some sort of reference, some sort of I would say a tool or that keeps you on track with the best practices so that you can apply your expertise in a way that scales and that can spread throughout the organization. So these things might sound a little bit kind of like just theoretical. We will show examples of these things, and we'll also show how certain tools that you can have or that you already have in AWS can actually help you solve those. So now what we want to do, we want to sort of tie that to something which is something in the real world, which is Amazon FSx for NetApp ONTAP. So as I mentioned before, this is sort of the service that we're going to be demonstrating this whole idea on, which is a fully managed storage service available in AWS, which can support block storage, file storage, or object storage. It really has a very wide variety of workloads that it can be used for. Now, we want to sort of get an idea of how familiar you are with this, so we will ask you another question. It is important for us to know whether this is the first time you're hearing about FSx for ONTAP, which is the short name of Amazon FSx for NetApp ONTAP, or whether you've been using it or you're familiar with it. So this is really, I think, interesting. Amazon has so many different services that it is easy to um, you know, miss out on services, even if there's something, they are services that are very relevant for the kind of workloads that you're running. So I think soon, it's a pretty simple question. I think we can see the answers in a moment. What do you say, Luba? Do you think that what is your guess?
You know what? I never guess correctly here. Never. Whenever I'm guessing, it's always the opposite.
Yeah.
It was just if you're wondering, yes, I did not guess correctly again this time as well.
Ah, okay. Yes. So it seems that, yeah, there's more people that have either heard about it or even familiar with it than not, which
Mhm.
is fantastic because this will actually help with the next slides. What I mean by that is that I want to show a slide that we have on FSx for ONTAP. Now, this is an overwhelming slide because it's got so much information in it. The reason it's got so much information is because when we say FSx for ONTAP, ONTAP is a very sophisticated storage management operating system, which has really been evolving over decades. It's something that initially started off in the data centers with physical hardware, but this software evolved and it has really been adapting to requirements of enterprises for multiple industries, multiple workloads, and these features have been added over time, and they're really very, very fine-tuned to meet very, very specific requirements, but also giving the flexibility so the user can actually just adapt it to what they need. So I'm not going to go over all of these, and we do have many of these webinars, each one focusing on a different pillar of FSx for ONTAP. But in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to focus solely on the ability of ONTAP, which is the core of FSx for ONTAP, to balance the cost with the performance. So fortunately, a lot of you know it. So I'm going to be showing some of these features, which I'm not going to try and explain it in detail because we don't really have time for that. But I think it's more about knowing that these features are there inside the service, built in, and they operate without needing any kind of requirement from the user. It's really just a matter of saying, activate storage efficiencies, and they're working. So things like deduplication, which is when you have data and you often see this if you look at the specific blocks of data, you see that in many cases these blocks are identical. So instead of storing a certain block multiple times, you store it once and have pointers to that block, which can be a significant saving depending on the data, of course. And then things like compressing the data, compacting it so that there's no empty spaces there, so that it's really taking up a smaller footprint than it would be if you were just storing it in its original form. So these are things that are built into the core of ONTAP. So it's done in line. It's not something that is sort of added on. It's really done as the core of the product itself. And I want to show you some numbers about like how much the savings are. But Luba, can you say from your experience with working with customers how significant this can be when it comes to saving costs?
Absolutely. So it's really significant. One of the examples or one of the things I always tell to my customers is even when you look at things like deduplication, Robin mentioned the fact that it's using block. Think about in your environment, you might have multiple files that are duplication of each other, but block goes even below that, right? So a certain block could be the same one in multiple different files, even if they're not the same. This means that the whole efficiencies can be again, and I will say depends on the type of your workload. Some workloads are a bit more, I would say, the efficiency there could be greater, some a bit lower, but it could be well over 50% in many of our customers. And think about it, you with a simple check that says, yes, I want to enable these efficiencies, which by the way, do not affect the performance. And so they're completely safe to use. You can save a lot of space in your environment. And again, you do it beforehand. Once you define it, like Robert said, there's nothing else for you to do. The system from that point on will take care of it by itself. And I think in the next slide, Robert, we have some examples for actual environments, right? And we
Yeah.
can see different numbers on how
Yeah.
well each one of those efficiencies can help when saving space and data. And you can see the numbers here, and they're changing obviously both between industries and also between the different efficiencies that are available, because each one of those efficiencies, or the duplication or compression, has a different effect on the data and different, I would say, effect on the type of the data. So if we look at things like databases, maybe deduplication won't be really helpful, but compression still can save you up to 70% of your data. And vice versa, if you look at geosystemic data, and trust me, usually geosystemic data, I don't know if we have any of our visitors here in our webinar that come from this area, but any geoseismic data is a lot of data, right? It starts with huge data blocks, huge data files, and so on. So in their case, again, compression can save a lot as well.
Yeah. So I think the key here is really the fact that you're not reducing the performance of the storage. What you're doing is just using the storage in an intelligent way, so that this footprint itself, the amount of actual space it takes up, is much less. And this is really significant. And this is, like I said, it's something that should really be the standard when it comes to storage.
Yeah. And in my demo later on, I'm going to show you how easy it is to verify that your efficiencies are enabled, and also how you can see how well the efficiencies are working in your environment.
Yeah. So that was just something that is in general. In general, you want to reduce the costs, and this is something that does reduce the costs. Now I want to sort of go back to the ideas that I spoke about earlier, like over provisioning, things like that, and how they are addressed with additional technologies. So thin provisioning is something that addresses the whole idea of over provisioning. So if a team says, I need a certain amount of capacity, you've got different teams asking for volumes, 30 terabytes, 20 terabytes, where if I had to give them all of that capacity, I would have to give 80 terabytes in total. And what happens is, in ONTAP, or FSx for ONTAP, as ONTAP running as a fully managed service in AWS, what it does, it allows you to provision storage volumes, but without actually allocating the storage. So the user sees that they have 30 terabytes, 20 terabytes, but the total allocated storage is 0. And really, it's only when they start using the data, then this data starts taking up the capacity. So what typically happens is that people are usually asking for a lot more storage than they really need, and they end up using a small percentage of that. So that just gives you the flexibility of not paying for storage that's not being used. So instead of just buying a disk and just using 10% of it, you are allocating virtual storage. I mean, there is storage allocated, but the high performance storage is really just used based on the actual storage, which is lower than the provision. In this case, it's 35%, 35 terabytes, which is much less than 80. So this is a way of overcoming the over provisioning of storage, and this is something that FSx ONTAP does by default. The next thing is something that I mentioned about data being hot or cold, and this is really a very important thing, because data that is just going to be lying around and not accessed doesn't need to have high performance, and therefore it can be stored in a lower cost tier. But that requires some sort of intelligence. So for example, in this case, like we just saw, if you got the primary storage tier, which is where the hot data is, if the data is there, it's for example SSD, which is high performance but also more expensive than let's say object storage. What you can do is, if the data is not being accessed over a certain period of time, it can be tiered. It can be moved to lower cost storage for reducing the cost. And this is something that's done automatically. So it's not that the user has to decide which files are going to be accessed and which not. It's actually on the block level. So the specific blocks, which could be the metadata even, which are being accessed very regularly, are going to be on high performance storage. But as I said, this could be 20% or less of the total data. So you've got 80% of the data on low cost storage where it's not actually being moved. You can see the data. The user sees all the data as if it's there. If you read the data, it will be reheated and moved back automatically to the hot data. But it's just something that really saves costs over time, again, without impacting performance.
Yeah, and Robert, before you go for the next way to save money using FSx for ONTAP, I just want to mention a customer of mine, a large university, and they were planning a migration, already after this migration, from on-prem to the cloud. And one of the things they talked about and was a concern for them, they said, listen, we have a lot of data. Most of that is never touched again. Now, I'm sure any one of you who ever went to university knows that there's quite a lot of work that you need to do and exam results and all those things. Most of them, they touched once and that's that. And for that customer, that university, what they've done is they enable data tiering on all their volumes and all their file systems and set it up in such a way that any data that has not been accessed for the last 31 days, for the last month, would be more moved to the cold tier. And for them, it was amazing saving costs because, again, most data, it touched just once and that's it, maybe twice, but after that they just need to keep it because if somebody for some reason will ask about whatever, maybe some doctoral thesis that they've submitted and they need to extract it, but mostly it's not used. And Robert, do you want to guess what was the percentage of the data that was moved to the capacity tier?
Was it, wait, it was more than 80%?
Yes, it was 86% actually.
Six.
So
Wow.
think about it, 86% of their data after they moved to the cloud, or even before it was not moved. And instead of saving it on the more expensive and more performance strong primary tier, they just, again, with a simple definition of defining yes to data tiering, the data was automatically identified by the system and moved to the cold tier. And by the way, it wasn't just part of the migration, it's actually how they manage their environment since moving to the cloud. This is the definition they have and they stayed with that. So even in the long term, they will still be able to keep their costs down without any negative effect on the performance on the data that actually needs to be used on a daily basis.
Yeah, so this is really kind of like a best practice. It's about enabling it by just saying, I want data tiering and also defining how long is cold data defined. Is it after 30, if you say after 30 days, if no one's touched it, I want to move it, or you can define whatever it is that suits your own needs. But over time, this is a significant cost saving. And now the next topic I want to present here is NetApp snapshots. And this really is a unique thing because anyone who's familiar with it is really knows that this is a game changer. And the reason is that snapshots, often when you think of snapshots, you say, well, there's a volume of data. What I'll do is I'll copy that volume. And then if there are changes, they're like I want to make a new snapshot, I'll just do that based on the existing snapshot. But I'm copying the full data volume. Now, what happens in NetApp is that the initial snapshot that you create doesn't take up space. What it is, it's based on pointers. So there are pointers to the data. So as long as the data stays the same, you've got a snapshot, you can create hundreds of these snapshots without any impact on the costs. It's really something that is insignificant. And then it's only when the data changes, so the snapshot is 0. If the data changes, one of the block changes, then that block is then stored. So out of all here it's just 3, but let's say thousands of blocks, one of them changed, you're only consuming 1 block of data. And then if the original data itself changes and you create another snapshot, that snapshot, again, won't take up any space. So what you're doing in this case is that you are having the ability to just create snapshots freely without worrying about this adding cost. So if you've got, for example, you could have lots of teams in the organization and they have their own data. They can choose how frequently they want to do snapshots, or you could have a policy that does frequent snapshots. But the idea is that when snapshot doesn't have a big impact, or it doesn't have an impact on the costs, it's something that really gives you the ability to fall back to previous versions without worrying about costs. So overall, the advantages here is that they are created instantly. So even if it's a large volume, it's instant because it's based on pointers and not on actually copying the data. It's also non-disruptive and very, very cost efficient. Now, snapshots is great because that gives you the opportunity to fall back to previous versions. It's like do that, but there's something else you can do with snapshots, and this is where it gets interesting. And this is something called a flex clone. So you got snapshots, but you turn this snapshot into a clone. That is, you kind of like separate it from its parent so that it can be used as an independent volume. So what that means is, you've got this clone, but the clone is not taking up space until either it or the volume that it's been cloned, the original volume is changing. So what that means is that you can really create, sorry, let's go back. Yeah. You can create multiple clones like you would with snapshots. You take an environment, let's say the production environment, and you can create dozens of dev test environments based on that. And these are not full copies of the production, but really, because we're using these pointers, it's very, very low cost. So only the changes that happen in this environment are the things that will be stored.
Robert, I want to share with you, I don't know if I share with you this story. One of the customers I'm working with, there are a startup, and they've been around for, I guess, a year and a half now, give or take. And when they came and wanted to use FSx for ONTAP, one of the things they told me is that their development environment is quite complex. They actually have 5 different environments. Let me see if I can remember all of them. It's 5, so let's see. Where there's, of course, there's the development, the test, there's the staging, pre-prod, and prod. Yeah. Okay, I think I got it. Now they had an issue. They said, how can we make it efficient? Because we have a lot of environment and we have a lot of data. How can we make it in such a way that each team could have access to their environment without negatively affecting the other team, but also without encountering cost after cost, like you said, one environment and another, and a copy of an environment when it goes on and on and on, and sometimes you need to keep multiple copies. It could be very expensive, and this is exactly what they've done. They utilize the combination of the snapshot, which is the cornerstone for this cloning capability. So what they've done, and this is they do it in an automatic way, they're actually using our tool, our Workload Factory that I'm going to demo later on, to create the clones that they need whenever the environment is ready to move on. So when the development team are ready, or they have their new version available, they create a clone and send it to the next team for the testing. And afterwards, there's also another environment for the staging, pre-prod, and then production. All of that with minimal cost. It's all done instantaneously, right? So it's not like they need to say, okay, I need to do a process now to create an environment. It will take me a day. Robert, they don't even have time for a cup of coffee between the creation of starting the creation of the clone and having the environment ready.
And that's really, like you said, that's more and more critical because of the cycles, the development cycles are getting shorter thanks to AI.
Yes.
And it really helps you if you want to be competitive, you have to be able to roll out new versions as fast as possible. And the fact that you can do it instantly, but also that you're not duplicating multiple copies of your production data, that's, I think, the key here. It's really using these pointers. It's only the data that changes that you're paying for, which is a very small percentage usually.
Yeah, but still each team has the access to the data that they can perform all the tests without affecting anybody else.
And if something goes wrong, you can just instantly
Yes.
delete it and create a new
Mhm.
clone instantly, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that really is where you, if you take a technology like the NetApp snapshot technology, which is really very unique, but build on top of that for more use cases like this dev testing environments, that's really where it's not just about the production data, but everything, all the different environments are now cost effective. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so I think we'll move on just to show some examples of what Forrester and IDC, what they see about from analysis, the impact of these technologies on saving. So it is significant numbers, and we're seeing this again and again. In fact, when we have references from customers, we got, like, for example, customer story Bangkok Pan, who I think their issue was really having a in an environment with SQL Server environment with 300 applications that they migrated to AWS. So they use FSx for ONTAP. And what they need is something that can really scale, but also having a very strict RPO and RTO, the ability to restore data very quickly. So having these data protection requirements that are strict, you often are worried that the cost might be high. But even so, even with these strict requirements, they were saving costs thanks to the storage efficiencies, but also the way that FSx is deployed. It's deployed in a way with high availability across multiple availability zones, which also helps you save costs on the licenses, the SQL licenses that you need. So overall, this was a really significant cost saving for them. Another example is Infor, who have this software as a service, which is for medical services, I think, where I think their issue was really having millions of file operations every day, which is something that a lot of storage services can't handle. But ONTAP, which is really designed for many different use cases, is very good at handling. It can handle millions of files, millions of small files, or a few very large files, but it's very, very good at this file operations on the one hand, but also having this low latency, high performance, high availability with the cost efficiencies built into the system. So they actually got to a state where they were 65% lower cost than alternatives, which is significant. And also being able to meet the high performance, high availability, but also high performance, 70 million messages a day, which are based on these little files that are being written and read. So this, I think, is really an example where cost doesn't have to be, you don't have to sacrifice performance to get cost. You don't have to sacrifice availability and resilience to get cost reduction. So I just want to kind of finalize my part of this, and we're going to have the demo very soon. So I'll go back to this slide I showed earlier about these issues that are often the reasons that the costs are high, but reasons that are really unnecessary and they can be avoided. So first of all, we saw how storage over provisioning can be addressed within provisioning, which is just a matter of how ONTAP works. We also saw how the issue of different storage tiers is handled intelligently. You just have to click a button to enable it and just decide how long you think cold data needs to be called cold. The snapshots, which can take up a lot of space, are by default done in a very efficient way. Plus, these snapshots are used as the cloning technology, which allows you to have multiple. You can have hundreds of dev environments with literally no additional impact on costs. And I think the final thing is that these things are built into the technology itself. So when it comes to best practices, these best practices are actually there. There's really not very much you need to do. And this is what you'll see in the demo, that this demo will show you sort of like where these features are, but it's not that you have to go and become an expert on each one of these features. It's really something that we will see now in the next part, how simple it is to really to get the benefits of these. So now I think I've been talking enough. Now it's your turn, Luba, to walk us through the demo. I'm going to stop sharing now, if that's okay, and you can share your screen.
Of course.
And any questions that come up, like I said, please ask in the Q&A session, and we will try to answer it as much as possible during the session. And anything that's not answered, we will get back to you after the session. And as Luba mentioned, you will also get links to be able to try out these features yourself by well, you can basically test it yourself in a environment that is just not anything that you need to sign up to or anything. You just try it yourself. And if you're interested in having a meeting or exploring it further, then you can reach out to us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Really looking forward to that, to hearing what interesting you, what interests you have, and help you through the process of moving to the cloud. So you should be able to see my screen now, and what I'm showing you is Workload Factory. As we mentioned before, Workload Factory is a tool from NetApp, and by the way, it's a free tool to use. It's a SaaS solution that we've created at NetApp to make sure that you can get all the benefits out of FSx for ONTAP. As Robert shown you from the last 30 odd minutes, FSx for ONTAP is an incredible storage solution. It has so many functionalities, so many features, and we want to make sure all those features are easy to use, are accessible to you. I remember at the beginning when we asked about FSx for ONTAP, we had some of you who said that they never heard of that, or some that said we heard, but we're not really familiar with that to a very strong degree. So fear not, this tool, Workload Factory, is exactly the tool that you can use, and as I mentioned, free of charge, that you can use to make sure that the entire process of using FSx for ONTAP, from the migration to all the operation, can be done very easily, either via the API, or the UI, or via APIs that we also have available. So let me begin my demo by showing you numbers, right? We haven't seen numbers for a while now. So let me show you how Workload Factory can help you to do the comparison between having an environment on EBS, another storage from AWS, to FSx for ONTAP. So let me show you the example. So what I'll do here, I'm just going to select in my demo environment one of the environments that I have here. For this scenario, I wanted to show you a database, because database is a great way to show you how much you can save. And let me do optimize saving, how much you can actually save by using FSx when it comes to cloning capabilities, and how much you can save by that, and also snapshots as a whole. So I'm going to show you, and you can see here the numbers are, I would say, could be quite astonishing. In this case, and in this environment, you can see that I can save 73% in the same environment, in the same database, if I'll simply move it to FSx for ONTAP. Now, where are all those numbers coming from? Now, let me show you. So you can see here different breakdown of the cost, and specifically I want to speak about two of the items you see here. One is the snapshot and the other is the clones. Now, as Robert mentioned earlier, when it comes to both of those technologies, I don't think there's a comparison with FSx for ONTAP. It's a great tool that is built in such a way that you'll save a lot to be able to create an environment that is both recoverable, right? Many of our customers are using snapshot to make sure they can recover if there's an issue, or as we mentioned earlier, as part of their development cycle. So you can see here the numbers and the amazing savings you can get, again, because of the smart capabilities of FSx for ONTAP, capabilities that are not always, or most always not available in other storage solutions. By the way, if you're interested, I can tell you that Workload Factory can also create for you a template to deploy this environment, right? So if it's interesting and you said, yes, this is the environment I want, you can actually create, or have Workload Factory create and deploy the full environment for you. So that's one of the things I wanted to show. And now I want to show how Workload Factory can help you to manage all the other cost-saving capabilities that Robert talked about. So from tiering to some other configurations. I want to show you how simple it is to identify them. So I'll just let my environment load. And I'll show you what we have now. The way it works and the way Workload Factory works, it works simply by collecting information directly from the AWS environment and from the file system itself. And it can show you all the best practices that are available for you, and whether or not your environment adheres to those best practices. This is a great tool when you do a migration or even after the migration to make sure everything defined as needed. So I'll go here for one of my file systems. And I want to show you what I have, and I'll go immediately to our well-architected status. What it does, it's a built-in feature with this tool that looks at different best practices for both ONTAP and FSx, which is built on AWS, of course, environment, and shows you all the configuration that you have in your environment in different categories. So reliability, operation excellence, efficiencies, and obviously the topic of today's conversation, cost optimization. It runs automatically and provides you with actionable recommendations that you can do to make sure you keep your cost where you want them, which is as low as possible. So there are different types of checks that we are doing and verifications that we can do in our environment that you can see. So one of the things we talked about cold data, right, and the tiering. What in this case, I have an environment that is defined in such a way that each and every volume is defined with tiering enabled. I'll show you soon how you can enable that, but if it wouldn't have been defined correctly, the system will automatically identify the volume or volumes without tiering defined, and with a single click, I would be able to change and fix the issue to make sure my system is aligned with all the best practices. Now, this is just one of the configurations that we have here in this environment, and in Workload Factory, we check other functionalities and other features of the environment to make sure that the system is always defined in the best possible way. And if there's something that could be adjusted, you can do it very simply by simply clicking here, View and Fix. And the system will show you, okay, this is my demo environment. So sometimes it's reminding me that this is a demo environment. Let me see if another one will work. Okay, here it is. So you can see in this case, once I clicked here on the View and Fix, I actually got here information saying to me, this is what's going to happen. This is the action summary, details on what will happen, and if there's going to be any effect on the environment itself, so I can decide whether I want to make the modification right now or whether I want to maybe open a change request and do this modification later. And by the way, Robert, we have, I'm sure you know, we have many customers that have quite a lot of environment, right? That could have even dozens or even more file systems. And in this way, they can automatically verify the configuration of their environment without having to, remember all the best practices that, by the way, sometimes changed, right? When there's new features enabled and new functionalities, our tool and Workload Factory actually grows with those new functionalities and will show you those new features and make sure that you align with them.
Exactly. Yeah. I think, and just to add on to that, it's like it's not that it's replacing the AWS console. It's more like a complementary thing that when you start to scale, I mean, when you're starting off, the console lets you just set up environments, and it's great when it's at a small scale. But when you talk about enterprise scale and multiple environments, maybe multiple accounts, it is kind of necessary to see things in a wider scale.
Absolutely. So I just want to show one other thing today is a view of the volume. So this view will show you, and it's a good way to explain the different features that Robert talked about and see them in live environment. So let's start with data distribution and call tiering. And you can see here the differentiations between the data. So you can see on the top level, the dark blue is the data that was actually written to the disk, the data that was written. The light blue, the used SSD, is the data that was written after all the efficiencies took place. This is my demo, so sometimes the numbers here changing. Don't worry about it. It's not going to happen to you in a real life system. And the purple line here is the data that's been moved to the capacity tier, so the cold storage.
So the purple represents the savings here, right? It's
well, both of them
majority.
actually, because this is the actual data that was written,
Yeah.
and this is the data that actually was remaining after the efficiencies in the disk itself on the SSD, and part of this data was also moved away again to the cold tier. So both of those definitely represent it. Another thing I want to show you is that we can easily see here the tiering policy, what's defined. But we don't just show it, we can actually change that, right? So you can go ahead and change the tiering policy. Let's say that you define something in the beginning, but over time you found that you need to change it. For example, maybe you started with a configuration that after 31 days, files will be moving to the cold tier, but you notice that there's much less usage than expected. So you can simply go ahead and change it to 7 days, click apply, and that's that. This specific volume configuration has been changed. Simple as that. Very fast and very easy. Another thing that I can show you here in our advanced engines, you can of course set the storage efficiency. So if it's not enabled, you can change it from here. And last thing, I just want to show that you can manage the snapshot directly from Workload Factory. So you can see all the snapshots that you have available in the environment. In this case, I don't have any snapshots there defined, but if I would have, I would see a list of all my snapshots here. I'll be able to create a new volume from the snapshot. And of course, there's the functionalities to create a clone from a specific snapshots. And this is just a small part of what Workload Factory can do. I just wanted to focus on the items that we covered here.
Great. Okay, so now yeah, I'll just share my screen again. Really, just to conclude. So first of all, thank you everyone for your time and for spending this time with us in the session. I hope you learned some new things. But I think just to summarize what we're saying is that as we've seen, most of you are either familiar with or you're already using FSx for ONTAP. It has a whole lot of really, really great features that can significantly save costs. And these are things that if you go into Workload Factory, you can really find those things and activate them, or even see these comparisons like we saw, even just seeing the bars of how much you're saving. And you can see if you can tweak these things to make it even more adapted to your needs. So we encourage you, if you haven't tried Workload Factory yet, then there's a QR code here that you can use. It's pretty simple, straightforward. And we will have more sessions like this, focusing on different areas of FSx for ONTAP, around different pillars of this very advanced intelligent system. So thank you very much, Luba, for the great demo and for being in this session with me. And I really
Thank
want
you,
to
Robert.
thank you all for your time. And you can reach out to us if you have any questions or if you need any additional information. We'd really be happy to address it. So have a great day and goodbye for now.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.